Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's talk on design thinking for digital transformation. We are excited to have you all here as we explore how AI and data analytics can revolutionize product building. Our speaker today is Kshitiz Anand, a design thinking and AI innovation expert and founder of Hornsey. With a wealth of experience leading design teams at Paytm and 1MG, Kshitij has been instrumental in driving digital transformation through innovative approaches. You are for an insightful session. Let's dive in. Over to you, Kshitij.
Thank you, Ashutosh. With your permission, I'm just going to start sharing my screen as well.
Certainly.
All right. Second. Okay. Great. I hope my screen is visible to all. Is my screen visible to everyone? Quick hand, thumbs up.
Yes, your screen is visible to us.
Okay, great. It should go in a presentation mode now. Perfect, great. So thank you so much for the opportunity, edForce. And it's always a pleasure interacting with people. I've been doing design thinking coaching sessions for quite some time now. And what's very interesting is, as the years are progressing, as the world around us continues to evolve, I find that there is more and more liking for design thinking and the kind of things that we have been, thinking about. So what we'll do is, we'll kind of go through this. We have about like an hour and a half in all, but we'll try to keep it to about 70 minutes to about 75 minutes for about, just having the session. And then the last 15 minutes, we can probably open it for more question answers as well. In between, if there are any questions that you end up wanting to ask, please feel free to use the chat where we can probably take those questions at the end as well, right? In the interest of time, we'll not take questions in between. We will take questions at the very end. However, in the between, we will have some interactive elements where I would expect you to put in your responses on the chat window. So hopefully we can do that as well, right? So just a quick 10 seconds, 15 seconds about Fondesan, which is basically an experience studio where we help organizations with customer experiences, product experiences, brand experiences. And we try to leverage the power of AI, design, strategy, and of course, technology, right? We are headquartered out of Delhi NCR, and we have a lot of team members who sit out of Bangalore as well. And it's part of a larger Happy Horizons group, which is the group entity of which Fondesan is a part of. Ashutosh has already given you a little bit of overview about me, so I won't talk much about that in details. But what you can expect in today's webinar, just to give you an overview, so that you also are hooked to stay till the very end. And as Ashutosh has kindly mentioned, that we do have some goodies at the very end as well. So hoping that we kind of stick around. It is a lot informative because this is a topic which is kind of very dear to me, and it's kind of very informative as well. And along the way, we will try to, of course, have some examples shared of how people are using it. What are some of the principles on which the whole evolution of product building is happening around us, right? And while we're doing this, you can also reflect upon the kind of products that you have been using in a day-to-day work. And I think you will find evidences of how AI has actually started to become an integral part of your life, right? At least for me, it has become a very integral part of my life. I don't see that going away anywhere. Right? Of course, it comes with a downside of the fact that we are ending up, giving more data to the people who do the data mining. But at the end of the day, that's the compromise we ended up making, right? So we kind of talk about design thinking, a little bit about digital transformation, also like how we start to leverage AI for product building. Some of you already may be doing, some of you may not be doing. For those who are doing, it's kind of nice reinforcement. For people who are planning to explore this, it's a nice way to kind of get into those domains, right? Also at the core of all AI is data. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about data analytics. This is not a webinar on data analytics, so we won't go into details, but to give you a glimpse of how data is kind of being used and the kind of data that is being collected, what are the kind of models people start to use to kind of create some very interesting decision-making paradigms, and how that can be then be used into your product building as well, right? Of course, at the end, we kind of come back to the notion of, with this AI in place, where does design thinking fall in, right? Because traditionally it's been around for quite some time. We'll talk about that. And of course, we'll talk about some examples and some success stories, which will kind of help us to get a little bit more deeper into the world of design thinking, right? Hopefully at the end, we'll have some, the time frame might go here and there a little bit, but hopefully we'll try to finish off by our stipulated time that we have. A little bit about me. I won't go too much details. Ashutosh already told you, but I do a lot of these trainings nowadays. Nowadays, I'm involved heavily. In fact, that's my primary source of engagement in corporates, because I really enjoy sharing these knowledges. I really enjoy engaging with a lot of companies in trying to understand, how they can have develop a different way of thinking towards solutions and ideations for their own organizations, right? So, organization building, strategy roadmaps, leadership development, upskilling of teams, or actually solving a problem which sometimes often needs an external expert to kind of help out with. And we as an expert, we come in and we kind of help out with different clients, right? Been very fortunate to engage with lots and lots of clients across different domains, from manufacturing to services to, BFSI has been one of our major domain that we work with. Pharma companies, academic institutions, HR tech, right? You name it, right? And that's the power. What I've realized with design thinking is it kind of allows you to use the framework into the application of the specific organization, right? Even within organization, there could be different, different teams which may use the same framework but solve a completely different problem, right? And that is something which always keeps me excited, because no two workshops or no two sessions that we end up having with clients are actually the same, right? Because teams are different, the people are different, and it's kind of very fun exercise as well, right? All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to kind of use the chat window a little bit. On the chat window, I just want to get a quick heads up of where you're joining us from. I know people generally join us from all over the world typically, but I'm guessing that in the interest of time zone right now, it might be mostly people from India. Just put the city name, right, where you're joining us from, just so that I get a sense. So we have people from Bangalore, Noida, Mumbai, Hyderabad, interesting, Pune, Bangalore. Bangalore seems to be leading the back today. Tamil Nadu, okay, where in Tamil Nadu? Hyderabad, Chennai. Okay, that's a nice bag. What is very interesting is that, during COVID, when I would do these sessions, I was actually doing it across the globe, right? And I would have, in these open webinars, people joining in from Romania, people were joining in from, Spain, people are joining from Singapore, and all across the globe, right? I think that's one thing which, COVID, at least the bone of the COVID era has been that, we have now got these tools in which we are able to kind of have these kind of sessions much, much more smoothly as well, right? So great. So it seems like a nice mix of audience. Bangalore people, I hope you're safe with the rains. NCR people, I know we are kind of slowly starting to welcome the winters. And of course, it's like the whole the country is in a state of flux right now. Great. All right. Second question, quickly, right? Have you attended any design thinking session before, right? When I say session, it could mean a workshop, it could mean a course, it could be a lecture. If yes, what kinds? I see many people, I see more no's than yes as of now. Okay, that's very interesting. And this is kind of very interesting for me because, I always think that, hey, this is so common sense, right? It's been around for so long. Many people should have actually like understood or like kind of come across design thinking, right? But of course there are some people who have got it through the office, through interaction and foundation, and through your LinkedIn courses that are available as well. But by and large, it's kind of very surprising to me also at times that information which is so readily available across different platforms, people kind of have some idea about it, but they always are eager to, or they crave for this, more structured way of talking about a certain thing, right? So I'm hoping that, like, even if you have kind of, taken a course, attended a session, something that you have done, even then you would have some key takeaways towards the end of the day today as well, right? And for folks who are new to design thinking, I'm hoping this could be a nice trigger for you to get a little bit more deeper into exploring the domain of design thinking. Because as I said, like it's been around for quite some time, but not many people kind of go into depth of it, because often, a lot of things takes more amount of time and sometimes it becomes difficult for people to kind of see immediate results, right? And they get frustrated, right? So hopefully we can, and I'm sure, like, towards the end we can post the workshop, we can post this session, we can share some more extra reading material and stuff, which will help you to go a little bit deeper into the domain of design thinking. All right. So with that, we kind of go a little bit, into the world of design thinking, right? Also, quick check on the audience. One last question before we go jump and right into it. Which domain are you from? Like product side, design side, L&D side, or you're on the engineering side, or anything else? Just a quick yes or no. I can see I see a lot of L&D folks. It's kind of very interesting. Nice, good. There's product, L&D, HR. Okay, that seems like a nice mix of people as well, right? So then the reason why I asked this is because some of the examples you find it more relatable. Also, you get a very detailed understanding of what to expect on the whole thing, right? Okay, great. So just to kind of set it as an even ground for everybody, right? What we'll do is we'll kind of go a little bit of the fundamentals of design thinking. Some might be reinforcement for some people who have already kind of taken some courses. For some, it could be some like new insight that you might again discover as well. And then also look at how we can learn in the context of AI as we go forward as well, right? So one quick trivia question, right? Like, how old do you think the domain of design thinking is? And this is for the people who have probably not done design thinking courses before. Take a guess, right? Like, how old do you think this whole domain of design thinking is? Again, let's use the chat window, extensively, right? So since we have it with us, 5 years old, okay. Someone says 5 years, okay. What else? Other people, some ideas. How old do you think the domain of design thinking is, right? 4 or 5 decades. Akhil, very interesting. Okay, great. Anybody else? Come on, take a guess. There's no right or wrong answer. So let's take a guess. About 30 years, Dipender. Okay. Akhil is okay. Decade old. Okay. Since the beginning of civilization, Anita. Wonderful. Yes, of course. Why not? 24 years. I like how Ashwar is like very particular. It's like 24 years, right? Wonderful. Kritika says 20 years. Okay, great. Yeah, so it's been around for quite some time, right? And I think, when you break it down to the fundamentals, it's actually something which is very old. But it's kind of, it's kind of the mid 20th century, the 1950s, 1960s, typically, when there was this emerging field of artificial intelligence booming, right? It's kind of very interesting how, like, almost around the same time when artificial intelligence was being talked about, where people are talking about creating of the artificial, right? The sciences of the artificial with Herbert Simon, he wrote this very interesting book. And around the same time, people started to question whether, this whole act of creating this new things in a creative manner is actually a science, right? Is there a science to it? So there's a certain process to it. And it was rooted in architecture and industrial design. But this whole systemic approach, right, to problem solving, which actually emphasized on or prioritized empathy, collaboration, experimentation in problem solving, is what came to be known as design thinking, right? And one of the most key figures who kind of promoted this from the very beginning was this gentleman called Herbert Simon, who was a Nobel laureate, and he kind of started to question, right? And he started to propose this whole idea about like design thinking as a process of changing existing situations into preferred ones, right? And that's where the genesis of design thinking is typically said to be. Of course, he wrote this in his very famous book called The Sciences of the Artificial in 1969. And about 1978, he went on to win the Nobel Prize in Economics. And this is a time where the whole world was kind of, bustling with a lot of industrial design. The whole was kind of, a lot of product design were being built. Tech was starting to make its way into the world because we are, just talking about, computer systems becoming more a little bit popular. I mean, the 1980s boom of the PCs had still not come, right? And people are still exploring these new areas, new fields that were emerging, right? And this is where, when Herbert Simon wrote this book called The Science of the Artificial, he kind of talks about this way of, creative problem solving, right? But of course, it takes more to kind of prioritize things, right? And if you look at it fundamentally, design thinking is a mindset shift, right? In the way of thinking, acting, and interacting, right? And through some people who are actually heavily influenced by design thinking, it actually becomes a part of their life, right? It's almost like it's your, systemic way of problem solving, and problems are everywhere, right? So no matter what domain you are part of, if there is a problem, you would probably want to still use that same approach to problem solving, right? And this whole framework that we'll talk about or this process that we'll talk about, it opens this new world of problem solving, right? Possibilities, and of course, to help you create this new innovative products, services, and process. And when I say, design thinking, it's not just only for building products, but I also feel that design thinking can be used for designing of new services, right? It could be used at a policy level, and it could be used in a lot of different domains as well. So the key differentiator, right, of design thinking, what I've observed over the years, is this, perennial focus on people, right? And I know we talk about AI, we talk about a world where, we are all talking about, uh, we are all talking about, the world being consumed by these large systems. But the fundamental differentiator, right, that design thinking I feel always has, is this whole human-centric way of doing things, right? And this fundamentally remains core even in the age of AI. And it's kind of interesting because I do a lot of sessions on empathetic leadership with a lot of companies and organizations, where again we talk about how in the age of AI, with all these tools that are available to us, we still have to be human-centric in our way of doing things, right? And we do this, of course, through a lot of observations, interactions, and very deeper understanding of human experiences, right? A lot of people try to take an understanding of human experience by taking a survey, or like taking an NPS survey, or taking a custom CSAT survey from your on your products. But often that doesn't tell you the right experiences, right? So that's where observations, interactions become very, very important as well. So fundamentally, if you look at it, it's this whole human-centered approach to problem-solving innovation, right? And it integrates three main things, right? One is, how do you really understand the needs of people, right? And in an age where things change so rapidly, I think understanding the needs of people has to be done very frequently, right? So today, you know your customer, let's say, 2 months down the line, the customer needs might have changed, right? Or a quarter down the line, customer's behavior might have entirely changed, right? So you need to continuously be able to understand the needs of people, right? So that is fundamentally understanding people front. Second is, what are the possibilities of technology, right? And this again, I think, is continuously evolving as the world progresses, as we look at the world around us, where we have, with AI coming in, of course, the possibilities are now endless, right? And specifically, if you look at the whole, if you've been following the whole OpenAI story, with the whole, evolution of ChatGPT into the models that we have, or you look at, let's say, like any of the other existing LLMs that are out there, the possibilities are now endless, right? Having said that, of course, the key part, the third integral part to this whole thing is this notion of what is the real requirement for business success, right? Because we can use the understanding of needs of the customers. We can understand that we have the technology that we can use to kind of fulfill that needs. But does it really make business sense for us, right? And if it can, then probably there's a good product that we can build out of it, right? So understanding the business success also becomes important. And this is what kind of the holy triad that we call in design thinking, and understanding the needs of people, which is basically what is the desirability aspect, understanding the possibilities of technology, which is basically your feasibility, and understanding the requirements of business success, which is viability, right? Like, is it actually viable for the business or not? So one of the one of the other way to look at it, right, that we often say is, when design thinking starts to become more popular, or it has become more popular, it's actually, what we're saying is, can we spend more time in trying to understand context better, right? Because at the end of the day, typically what happens is, if you have a problem, you want to kind of get to a solution, right? And that's your end goal, because obviously there's timelines, there's pressure to delivery, and you want to kind of get to a solution real quick, right? That's a typical business thinking, right? But when you look at design thinking, one of the things that it promotes a lot is this whole deeper understanding of the context, right? And this can actually be a time-consuming process. And that's also a reason why a lot of organizations don't do it, right? Because they have a knowledge of design thinking, but actually putting into practice sometimes becomes a challenge, because understand the context, right? Because when you understand context better and in more deep manner, you probably discover newer problems, right? Problems which were not very evident to you, problems which don't come out in a survey research form, problems which don't come about when you just talk to, let's say, only two users, right? And that is where, getting a more holistic understanding of the context, which is more at a very systemic level, right? If you can spend some time on that, and typically what I've observed in my years of this doing this is, large organizations are able to do it because they have the bandwidth, they have the budgets for it. In smaller organizations, sometimes it becomes a difficult thing. And the solution that I provide there is don't see it as a one-off thing that you would do, once in for, let's say, 2 days or 3 days, but can it become an integral part of your process, right? And so, continuously you're always understanding context in what you're doing. And obviously, when new problems get discovered, the probability of, thinking of a completely new solution also occurs out there. So this is typically what the whole, the most famous diagram, which everybody probably has heard about or seen when it comes to design thinking, right? And of course, there are lots and lots of models when it comes to design thinking, but this is the one that I feel is kind of encapsulates the process. I mean, you can modify it, you can, break one process into like subparts to it. But what I've observed over the years is this is kind of captures the process. Obviously, once you know the process, you can be flexible enough in, like speeding up a certain process, kind of jumping to the one, coming back to the other, and things like that you can do. But fundamentally, what we're saying is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Like a very simple 5 fingers of your hand, if you just a very easy hack to remember. It's like empathizing, right? The thumb rule is basically always we need to empathize first, right? Saying that how do we learn about our audiences better? Who is the audience, who is the user, what matters to them, who are the stakeholders, who are the people in the organization whom we should speak to, whose decisions are the customer is making their final decision basis of whom are they talking to, and things like that, right? So when you empathize, your goal is to get a deeper understanding of all the stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I'm not just emphasizing only on the end user of the product, right? There could be people beyond who are the beyond the user of the product who are actual decision makers, and they are actually also contributing, right? And so you need to kind of pay some attention to that as well. Empathize phase is typically a divergent exercise where we basically say, I'm going to explore as much as possible. I'm going to try and think and find out what are the things that are, problematic, where are the challenges, what are the stakeholders thinking, what's on their mind, what's the competition like, and all those things, right? Then comes the define phase where you're saying, can I define what I have understood in empathize, right? So then can I create some point of view? Saying this is what we understand, and basis of what we understood in empathize phase, these are some directions that we think that we can pursue, right? So the goal of define phase is to give you a clear direction into saying that, okay, these are the ones that are higher priority for us. And maybe we will use those things to kind of prioritize. And the other things can probably be taken at a later stage, right? So that's how you kind of prioritize, you create product roadmaps based on that. So good define exercises helps you to build good product roadmaps because you're able to say what is most important, what is like P0, what is P1, what can be pushed off for the next quarter and things like that. Ideate is basically, so empathize and define more is about understanding the right problem itself, right? Like understand the challenge and the real problems. Ideation becomes more about how do I start to think of solutions. So I kind of do brainstorming, I can do some like, like scamper exercises, lotus 8 exercises. There's a, like a different exercise that you can do to come up with as many ideas as possible, right? So that's the ideation phase, which again becomes like a divergent exercise. So I define was convergent and ideation becomes like a divergent exercise again. And then comes the notion of prototype, which is very important because when you have ideas in your mind or when you have ideas that you want to kind of express, there's no better way of getting feedback than by showing prototypes, right? So it's always recommended that if you start practicing the notion of prototyping or of visual thinking, we are able to get more feedback from people, right? So prototyping, you may not prototype everything. You probably will have to decide what is most important and then basically prototype it, right? And then the last part, which is basically the test part, right? Saying that whatever I have prototyped, I want to get some feedback from people so that I can give their I can get more feedback and iterate on this whole process. Right? So and what I've also observed is that that design thinking, there's this growing interest in design thinking over the years, right? And it's kind of been growing over the years a lot more. And I personally think that in the age of AI, where people are all talking about data, we are able to capture more data from people. Sometimes that notion of the people might get lost. So it's kind of good to always keep that in mind. So that at the end of the day, we are designing for people, right? We're designing for our customers. There are people who are going to be using our products, right? So how do we kind of keep that balance out? Of course, in the 1990s, IDEO kind of popularized the whole design thinking thing. That is where it kind of took it to the world. Your D School was launched at Stanford in 2004, which was kind of, that's the first time where they processified the whole design thinking process, right? Then, of course, you have lots and lots of evidences of people like Tim Brown, Roger Martin. They talk a lot about design thinking in different global stages. And that's where it became very, very popular around the world, right? Obviously, if you look at the world where around 2008-9 time where it became very popular, because the world was moving on from that, the recession that we had in 2008-9, where a lot of people were exploring these new ways of solving business problems, right? And IDEO was kind of encashing on that. So this whole IDEO's popularity surged. Stanford University, D School, the influence. Then, of course, a lot of organizations were starting to explore this notion of digital transformation, right? So that was one wave during the 2008-9. And now we are seeing a new wave of digital transformation with AI in picture, right? And this is where I think it's a very interesting time to be actually building products. Obviously, a lot of business and innovation was starting to take shape. Design thinking also talked a lot about storytelling, right? Say that whatever you're building, you need to express it, you need to show it to people, get people's feedback, right? So the moment people started showing more visuals, lots and lots of ideas started to flow, and that made things very, very popular as well, right? So there are a lot of people who started using design thinking in different contexts, right? And as I said, and I wanted to kind of give some insights of like some of the areas in which people have been able to use design thinking, because often the misconception that a lot of people have is if I'm a product company, design thinking is good for me. But if I'm, let's say, a services company, I don't need design thinking, right? Or if I'm an HR company, or how can design thinking help me as an HR company, right? Or if I'm an L&D organization, right? How can design thinking help me as an L&D person or within my L&D? So I'll show some examples of how people have used design thinking in different contexts, right? So one, of course, if you look at any product or anything where there's a lot of customer touch point involved, right? Wherever there's, for example, let's say the case of the hospital or the healthcare ecosystem, wherever there is a lot of customer touch points involved, you really need to kind of leverage. You can literally leverage this because the whole fundamental notion of empathize becomes very popular, important there, right? So you can actually understand the needs and problems really well if you start leveraging this a lot. So this is, of course, Rotterdam Eye Hospital in Rotterdam. We basically use this to rethink the entire experience of like. And when you say rethink the entire experience, obviously some of the solutions might be at a very product level in that overall experience thing. Some products might be a purely just rethinking their entire furniture placement, for example, or other solution might be rethinking the environment in which patients actually go and meet the doctors, right? So the outcomes or the solutions that might come out at the end of design thinking exercise could be manifested in a product, in a service, in a space design, whatever. But fundamentally, if we're able to understand the problems well, that really adds immense value. The other one I think all of us are probably familiar with. This is one of those folklore in design thinking where people talk about Airbnb and how they have literally like leveraged design thinking to understand better travel experiences for people. And it's not just about the end traveler, right? Even at the host level, I think a lot of design thinking is used because people are able to think about the host, also empathize with the host as well, right? Because they are the ones who are actually eventually giving the end experience to that particular customer, right? So Airbnb uses it a lot. And in fact, towards the end, I talk about how Airbnb is now using AI again to rethink the travel experience even further. All right. Then I did a systemic change, right? When it comes to, let's say, like a systemic change of an entire thing, right? Of an entire city, right? Like a transportation system. And whenever I show this example, I remember in a workshop in Bangalore, and people are like, "Oh, we can definitely use this, right? Because we definitely need a fixed." And actually, not the case of only Bangalore. I should not call it out. I mean, even Gurgaon in drains becomes bad. Delhi also becomes bad. Mumbai, of course, we are all familiar with. In fact, all the cities in India face a lot of problems because of that, right? Because of rains and infrastructure not being well defined. But imagine if you were to use it at a very systemic change. And in fact, a few weeks ago, when Don Norman was visiting India, and we were having a session with Amitabh Kant, who was the G20 Sherpa, and we were talking. The whole event was around how designers and design thinking can actually work with a lot of ministries in the country to actually solve for these problems in, like, for example, urbanization, right? Solve problems for like smart cities. Like we are building smart cities, but you go to any smart city that is being built, and you can find like at least like 100 problems out there, right? And somewhere you feel that, designers need to start making their way into those things. And when I say not just designers, because designers are anyways less, right? But imagine if everybody who's trained in the way of design thinking can start to make their, like presence felt, and start thinking from that perspective. I think a lot of systemic change can actually happen as well. This is when you're looking at an organizational level, right? So for example, Indra Nui, when she was the CEO at PepsiCo, she kind of used design thinking to look at how do we reposition PepsiCo's brand positioning. Because PepsiCo, of course, you all know the cola companies. There's a lot of research that says that they have been contributing to the whole obesity pandemic in Western countries, or actually it's now even in India. Diabetes is on the rise, sugar in drinks and stuff. But just thinking from a purely from a strategy perspective, right? Like understanding, the big picture, the macro perspective, microscopic perspective, just to rethink how we as an organization can, rechange and rethink ourselves. Then, of course, in product building, you name it, right? Whichever product you look at, travel experiences, insurance, lending. When I was with Paytm, we used to talk a lot about how we can use design thinking for, for the merchant ecosystem, right? I used to lead the team at merchant ecosystem, and how we can basically leverage design thinking. I used to talk to a lot of product managers and see how we can, leverage these ways of thinking towards new product building in our thing, in our portfolios, companies. And then, of course, in the services companies as well, right? Because I do a lot of sessions with services companies, like, and they also having to deal with their clients, right? And if the team itself has a nice skill set on design thinking or this way of thinking, they are able to kind of engage better with their clientele, right? And that's something which has kind of really helped, in a lot of my sessions as well. So around the world, I think, you name it, like most of the companies have at least tried out design thinking. Many have actually built their own teams, departments, and made it a very cultural thing, right? Because see, the thing with design thinking is what I've observed is the success depends upon how deeply you're able to imbibe it into the company's culture, right? If it becomes like a one-off thing, let's do a workshop once a year and forget about everything that we did, then I can guarantee, right, that the teams will never see the value in design thinking. But the moment you do it like, regularly over a period of years and becomes a part of the organizational DNA, then I think, there's a lot of value that we see. Also, because we're talking about customer behavior, consumer experiences, right? I think it's also important to know that, design theory really helps us to go to this, really to understand the real customer behavior. What is the real human behavior? Because often what happens is people don't tell us, right? People won't tell you. If you ask them, how are you feeling? They will not tell you the real experiences. But as a design thinker, somebody who's trained in design thinking, if you can really go to that, that what's under the water, right? What's hidden there? What is something which people are not talking about? If you can basically tell that, that will really help us, help you in better product thinking as well. So I'll pause here for a quick few seconds, right? And I want to hear some thoughts, right? This is a question that I have been thinking about a lot, right? And this is something which I ponder about it a lot, and I would love to hear some people. So you can put your comments in the chat as well. So obviously, COVID made us more empathetic, right? Because we were like, okay, the world around us, people around us are being impacted. And obviously, like a lot of systems got impacted, people, families, organizations, etc. And on the other hand, with AI, of course, things are becoming, we are becoming like less empathetic, right? Because uh, there's obviously, here examples of, layoffs, examples of, organizational shutdowns, a lot of things, right? And everything is like it's because AI suggested to do that, right? So what do you think, right? What are your thoughts? We'll take a couple of responses, before we move ahead. So I keep thinking about this, that COVID made us more empathetic and AI is making us less empathetic. And this is actually one of the slides that I typically use in my empathetic leadership training programs as well, coaching sessions as well, kind of forcing them to really think, leaders to think. But what do you think? Let's take a few responses, people. Um, Anybody? Yeah, let's take a few. All right. All right, Ashwarya says, I don't think so. COVID made us, Shweta says, COVID made us think AI. Interesting. Right. Ashwarya, why? Can the participants unmute themselves? I don't know. Ashutosh, can the participants unmute, or do they have audio rights, or they can just use the chat otherwise? That's also okay.
I'm
Um,
sad the participants can't unmute themselves.
okay. Okay. No problem. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few more people. All right. Okay. I'm seeing some responses coming in. Okay. All right. All right. Do you think so? Let's do a quick yes or no, right? Do you think AI is making us less empathetic? Yes or no? I mean, let's try to answer that from a very yes or no question. Easy to answer, right? Like, do you think AI is making us less empathetic? It has. Okay, AI for good. Uh, AI is not making us less empathetic. So Priya says, interesting. Yeah. Someone says we are not prepared for this wave. Yeah, obviously. It's happening at a very fast pace, isn't it? Um, yeah, Ajit says AI has given us a new opportunity. Yes, of course, why not? Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of fascinating, and it's almost saying that, like, it's one of those moments in our lives which probably we are at, like, you can say we are fortunate to be a part of this system right now, where things are changing at a pace which, I mean, the whole world is being transformed, right? Great. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for the responses. We'll move forward. Great. So I think, one of the things, fundamentally, whenever I think about design thinking, right, I come back to this favorite quote of mine by Steve Jobs. And he always says that, technologies will keep coming and going, but you have to start with the customer experience, right? And work backwards to a technology, and not really use technology as a way for you to think forward, right? Because often what happens is we get too enamored by technology as a thing that we are proud of, but at the end of the day, customer experience is what really matters, right? And that is what is really really changing, right? And that is what you have to be mindful about. And in this digital first AI driven world, I think, customer experience, the pace at which is happening, right, the change is happening at a very rapid pace, right? And customer experience is also changing. Customer expectations are also changing, right? And I came across this very interesting quote, and I love to quote this: is like, the product is no longer the differentiator, right? Because at the end of the day, tech teams are built in a way that, until unless you have a very strong, like, very like an IP which no one else can copy, uh, teams can build things faster and in a better manner over a period of time, right? So the product is no longer the differentiator, but the experience is, right? And basically the customer satisfaction as well, right? So once the product goes through a certain experience, what is the customer satisfaction? And what I've also felt that, design thinking, by virtue of it being very customer centric, when you start imbibing the notion of design thinking in your day-to-day work, you're continuously thinking about customer experience, very regularly, right? So if we understand customer needs well, right, which is at the core of the empathize phase in design thinking, if we're able to understand customer needs well, we'll be able to delight our customers a lot more, right? So this is a very interesting way of looking at it, right? So typically what happens is, when you look at customer satisfaction, everybody wants to delight their customers, right? And and when we think of product building, obviously a lot of product managers, a lot of product companies have like a big list of product features that they want to build, right? And it's any brainstorming session, you will always come up with more number of product features than you can actually build, right? So at the end of the day, it's all about how well you can implement it, right? So you can go from a poor to good implementation, and the customer delight, you can go from a customer satisfaction, you can go from disappointed to a delighted customer. And if you're solving only for the basic needs, you can actually do a very bad job out of feature implementation in the product. You are guaranteed to have very disappointed customer, right? But let's say you kind of get to a state where you're able to address the basic needs and do it in a decent manner. You have a customer which is really, really okay. He's not disappointed, but he's not unhappy either, right? So it's not like happy, but like still like not unhappy, right? But then comes, if you start to analyze performance needs, right? Like, what is it that really gets the customers happy, right? And that is where, if your product features start to get built around those, that is where you start to see more, aspects of I'm able to give the customers more happy. They're actually happy about what we are doing. And customer satisfaction gets to the range of delight when I'm truly able to understand what truly delights the customers, right? And there are many instances, right? For example, if you've been following the whole quick commerce wars that has been happening in India with Zepto, Blinkit, and what was the third one? Instacart, right? Is it Instacart or Instamart? Instamart. So the excitement needs, right? Everybody's trying to capture that excitement because everybody knows that customer, whether they get it in 7 minutes or 9 minutes, won't make a difference, right? 7 minutes and 30 minutes was a difference, but like 7 minutes and 9 minutes is no longer a difference, right? But can I excite the customer by giving, let's say, I think Zepto started this Son Papadi that they are giving, right? Or I think they started something else in during Raksha Bandhan as well, right? And I think every festival they have something or the other, and they kind of use that as a hook to delight the customers, kind of address their excitement needs, and hopefully that customer comes back to the platform, right? And you'll start seeing many of these instances saying that if the company, if your product company is able to understand customer satisfaction, customer delight well, by understanding the excitement needs, I think some very interesting products and some interesting things will get built out as well. So when it comes to digital transformation, right? And I think design thinking fundamentally, I think can be used a lot in the whole design and digital transformation story. It had been used, it has been being used, and I think in the future where AI is the core of things, it will become a lot more deeply used as well. So when you look at digital transformation, I think there is almost every domain that we can think of, right, has been now transformed or is being transformed. I mean, like, let's say about 10 years ago, not many people would have thought that agriculture could be so transformed with digital tools, or digital transformation could happen in the agriculture space. Or for example, healthcare, if you look at it, has been transformed over the past decade or so. Or for example, if you look at any domain, right, education, during COVID, it got transformed. And now we'll see a lot of these new future scenarios where technology will start to play a role a lot more, right? We are seeing smart cities, smart homes, smartphones, smart beds, smart refrigerators, smart watches. Everything is now connected, right? The whole IoT paradigm where everything is connected, where everything is capturing data, everything is sharing data, and people are able to understand, okay, now can I give a better experience because we have more data, right? But if you look at real problem solving, some very pertinent things can actually leverage digital transformation and hopefully design thinking as well. For example, things like how do you solve for urbanization as a problem, right? How do you solve for the problem of, let's say, growing need for elder care, right? That's a major problem that the country is facing. I know India as a country, we are still a largely youth population country, but in the future, when this population ages, we'll have a major problem, right? Or for example, the whole workforce or the work environment has changed completely, the changing notion of work due to COVID, post-COVID, remote work, hybrid systems, all things have changed, right? The individual themselves, right? Their own identity, their own loyalty, their own sense of belongingness in the world. So all these problems are now happening, and which we'll see a lot of digital transformation happening as well, right? So what is called as that, initially you had the technology foundation. If you look at in India, the India stack, right? Like Aadhaar, UPI, those are the India stack things on which now you'll see a lot of new systems being built, for example, right? You have the entire banking system that got built on top of that. The lending system is being built on top of that. The ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, that is being built. You have the ABHA ecosystem, right? The digital health ecosystem by the government of India, which is again leveraging these basic foundations to now solve for these new problems, right? But internet, being social, connected, on the cloud, mobile, things which are like always on the move. Basis of these foundations, now we are able to kind of find newer use cases in which we are kind of starting to see digital transformation stories, right? And this will just happen. New startups will get built, new product ideas will get launched. But like 5 years ago, no one thought that Zepto could be a success, but now everybody is doing quick commerce, right? And that gives you a good indicator of how things change rapidly as well. But what's very interesting is that I came across this report by Accenture, which basically highlighted this point that despite all this technology innovation that's happening around us, I mean, the human focus is going to remain. In fact, as people's expectations for their future with technology grow, many enterprises, right, attempt to deliver on those expectations are being rejected, and leading companies will need to think of a new path forward, right? Developing models that bring a more human focus, right? And this is again very interesting because almost every major tech company has the capability of building tech innovations, building tech solutions. But somewhere this whole notion of human-centric is again becoming more important. As I was saying earlier as well, every domain and industry that we speak is being disrupted. So organizations need to be at the top of their innovation game, right? And what's very interesting about people is that people discover new solutions, they adopt these new technologies and develop different expectations, right? Based on their experiences they have with the product, right? So, for example, if you look at quick commerce, again, this is one of the hottest topics to discuss these days, right? So, quick commerce has literally changed people's expectations of retail industry altogether, right? I mean, like one fine day, Blinkit said that we are going to sell you, like earphones on Blinkit. Then you are like, oh, now it's no longer about groceries only, right? You can actually, and then the entire e-commerce SKU started to show up on thing, and then Flipkart is like, okay, why it limited to only few? Let's bring our entire warehouse, and this they're able to do it because they have data, right? They're able to say, okay, what is our most popular products? What are people ordering? And based on that, they're able to kind of create this entire model. So it's kind of very interesting to think about how new product building will happen when you have the capabilities of AI, being able to capture more data and information from audience, and then being very empathetic and mindful about our end customers as well. So, at the end of the day, our understanding the world and the people can be either, great or low, right? It's up to you. We are in this amazing position that I feel to leverage AI in a manner to build better solutions, right? What I've often felt is the challenge arises when we start to rely only on one. When I say only on one, if you're relying only on data and forgetting the human side, or if you're relying only on the human side and forgetting the actual real data side, right? That is where the real challenge happens. In the real scenario, in the ideal scenario, you would want it to be a mix of it so that people can give you the intuition also starts the trigger, but then you validate it with data. Or if you have a lot of data capture, can you actually validate it with some actual subjective information that you can capture? So I feel we should leverage design thinking principles into digital transformation strategies. I think by doing so, businesses will become more human centric, flexible, and more impactful solutions will get created as well. I think having said that, 5 things which are very important, which I think will be very critical for this entire this thing to play out, saying that digital transformation with design thinking. I think relentless customer-centric innovation, right? On the chat again, can you think of any company which you think really takes customer-centric innovation or customer obsession, customer centricity, customer experience obsession to the next level? Any example of companies that you can think of which really like understands customers really well? They continuously do their empathy maps. They kind of do their user customer journey mapping, or any company that you think that you have been really influenced by, which actually really puts high value on customer experience. Apple, Tata Motors. Okay. Yeah, Avinash, Tata Motors. Interesting. Yeah, Tata Motors I think has really like upped their game, right? The whole Tata group, yes, for sure. But Tata Motors in particularly, I know like because I think I first bought an Indica like way back, and then now of course the new version of cars, and generally the whole ecosystem has also evolved considerably. But any other example that people can think of? Paytm Soundbox, yes. IKEA, yeah, IKEA has a interesting. Obviously, they are very obsessed with the customers as well. Any other examples that people can think of where like the whole customer centric innovation is really out there? All right. So this is one, of course, right? So at the end of it, like keeping that as a very key thing, and what's very interesting is like even though now a lot of customer service centers have been taken over by bots and by like IVRS systems. IVRS system is old, but chatbots and AI driven systems. I think somewhere that whole customer centric innovation is still very essential as well. Second is obviously agility in problem solving, because we capture a lot more information, right? We are capturing more information. We are able to collect more real time feedback from users. I think our time to market gets reduced, and we're able to kind of improve on our product at a much faster pace than there used to do. I remember in the waterfall model, it used to take years, if not months. Now, of course, we're talking about sprints, right? And that's the opportunity that is there, that it brings about a whole agility in problem solving, and that kind of really kind of add value to our way of doing things as well. Obviously, collaboration. I think what has also happened, and which will also lead a lot more in the future, is when we have a lot more cross-functional collaboration. Designers working product working with engineering folks, engineering folks working with marketing, and they're all working together as well. I think that's an important area which is essential. And it is just going to encourage a lot more collaboration, a lot more new ideas to come up with, right? Data-driven personalization, I think one of my favorites was when with Paytm, we were able to build a product where we would actually personalize the loans for people. So not like, any generic loan that a merchant could get, but you could actually get a very personalized loan based on your merchant, transaction history, right? And it is kind of nice because, somebody would know that, okay, Mr. So-and-so, you are eligible for exactly this amount of loan, right? And in a very personalized manner. This I'm talking about a few years ago, not about like just a couple of months. So, but at that point in time, it was good because other than that, it used to be a very generic thing. Get up to X amount of loan, which is a very generic message. But then you are able to personalize it, right? And I think we're able to bring more personalization to the core of what we're doing. Then of course change management, right? Like because the fact that things change rapidly, product changes, government regulations change so much, right? Like in India, I remember working with Paytm. One of the key things that was always on the radar was what is RBI up to, right? And what are they thinking about, or what is NPCI up to? And that really kind of kept us on the toes, because at the end of the day, if something happens at a policy level, you had to quickly adopt and change, right? I remember this one time where RBI mandate came where companies could not, or like e-commerce, or like like online portals could not store credit card information. I mean, the whole industry, the fintech industry, went into a thing, right? In the hustle mode, and they had to kind of rethink and rebuild the whole thing. So when you start thinking that from the customer's perspective, say, okay, because of this mandate, because of this change that has come in, these are things that we need to do quickly, because otherwise the customers could get really frustrated, right? Also, one question that comes out a lot during my sessions is, how do you integrate into what we are already doing, right? So we are all used to doing the agile way of doing things. There's of course the lean way of doing things. I think it's never about either or, right? I think it's the best teams always do it together, where you have an agile way of working, which generally product teams follow, which is your product-based companies follow the whole sprint cycles thing. Lean, of course, helps you to kind of think about what with the MVPs, what is it that you really want to build out, what is the right thing that you want to build. Agile helps you to build in the right manner, but design thinking really kind of questions why you're even building it in the first place, right? And I think it really kind of adds value when you start to integrate design thinking into your entire product building process. And what I've seen from my years of experience is the best product teams kind of leverage all of them, right? It's no longer about, okay, we don't practice design thinking, or we don't practice lean, or we don't practice agile, or we do only one of those. I think it's always about how you use design thinking as a framework to kind of explore the problem in much depth. How do you use lean as a methodology to kind of build the right session, build the right things, and then how do you make sure that using agile to build things in the right manner, right? So design thinking basically is kind of highlights more about how to approach a problem. Lean is more about how to develop and test a solution, and agile is more about how to make and scale your solutions, right? And all great product teams, right, would actually function in this manner. All right, so moving on to the next part, right? Since we talked about digital transformation, strategies for digital transformation, how do we leverage AI, right? And this is something which I've been dabbling with a lot in my recent work through Foundation and also through my own work. I think when you think about leveraging AI for product building, right? This one quiz, right? When do you think the term artificial intelligence was coined? Quick trivia quiz on the chat window. Come on. Any thoughts? When do you think the term was coined? On the chat. 1962. I mean, that's like very precise. Like, it's come with homework done. All right, 1990s. Supriya is like 2000. Vivek is like 1990s. Okay, any other guesses? Any other guesses? Artificial intelligence. I mean, I know it's the buzzword these days. Actually, it's like 1956. Yeah, 1973. 1955. Okay, great. Yeah. But the term as such, yeah, it rose to fame in the late, I mean, like 2020 or in the 21st century, it kind of rose to fame a lot. But, the term was basically coined in about 1956 at a conference. And Ray Kurzweil, right? He's actually been working in the AI space for 6 decades. And this is a very famous talk, right, on TED, and maybe you should watch it at some point in time. It's called The Last 6 Decades of AI. The moment is 6 decades of AI, suddenly you're like, oh my God, it's like 60 years people have been talking about it. So there have been researchers who talked about AI for a very long time. And, it's a very humorous talk and a very nice talk, because he actually talks about this whole idea about artificial general intelligence, right, AGI. When will that become a reality? And they were trying to guess this in the 1956 conference where they coined the term AI. They were trying to guess, say, okay, when will artificial general intelligence become a reality? And I'm sure if all of you have seen the recent product releases that Elon Musk has done, with your, I should have had a slide on there. I forgot to put that. But basically with the whole, the self-driving cars, or the, I forget the name of the robot that they built, where it's like your personal concierge, right? And it's been around for so long, but it's only now. And I think what's very interesting is we are able to do it because now we're able to have better, better processing models, better algorithms to process all these data that we have around us, right? And in fact, what was very interesting and surprised a lot of people around the world as well is when the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize was launched to people who work in the, like John Hopfield, known as the father of AI, right? Basically for foundational discoveries and interventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks, right? And it's kind of very interesting to see how now AI is becoming a part of our, it's this thing, like it has kind of literally transformed this whole thing, right? Transformed the whole world around us. So obviously we went purely from data consumption, which was mostly the way of interacting with our products and services, which was early days was mostly data consumption, right? But then it also became about data creation, right? So every time you use a product, every time you use something, data is being captured, and that data creation is then being used for data mining, and hopefully that is being able to give you better decision making for the product, right? And what's kind of very interesting is I came across this very interesting quote in this book called Prediction Machines, where it said, the goal of AI is to predict better. And it sounds so like apt, right? Like everything that the AI is trying to do is trying to help it predict better. It's trying to predict what will be your next move, right? Predict what is the next grocery you'll order. It's trying to give you a recommendation engine which will say this is what you should do, and this is the movie that you should watch, right? So it's trying to predict what you might be thinking, right? And they're trying to kind of do this. And we're able to do this now because you have more data points, right? Earlier you didn't have the data, so it was not able to do it. But now we're able to do it because we have the data, right? So when we had less data, our systems were able to predict less. Now we have more data, so we are able to predict better, right? And products are using this large data to predict needs better, right? Remember how we started with understanding, empathizing with customer needs, understanding customer needs well. Earlier, you had to go and do interviews, ask people to fill out forms. Now, just by usage of product data, you're able to understand customer needs, right? Hey, this guy is continuously checking out a certain product every single time, right? Or it's like he's coming and getting stuck there, or he wants to order but is not ordering. What is the problem? So you kind of dig deeper because now you have data to kind of talk about it. So with this better understanding of customers, we can offer better experiences, right? And that's basically, if you ask me, that's the fundamental premise with which AI products with driven with AI should be built. Because if you're able to understand customer needs better, you are able to offer them better experiences, and that is what is going to make the customer stick with your. I mean, there used to be a time when people were saying that India was a very price conscious market. It still is, but today people have kind of, I feel they have slightly moved beyond that. You're okay to pay a slightly premium price if the experience is better. So in the case of, let's say, few things, right? Like if you look at B2B products or B2C products, different kind of products, you can have different kind of ways in which AI can be used, right? And specific, if you look at, like if you're a company or if you're a person who's building in the context of B2B products, I think, like things like process automation, bringing efficiency in what you do, I think AI can do that. And there's so many startups out there which are actually building just automation tools, right? Like the whole, your reimbursement process automated, flight booking automated, right? Bringing efficiency in what we're doing, right? So it can streamline complex business processes, including things like supply chain, customer service, right? And make it very, very data driven, right? So specifically in the case of B2B, and we are seeing in India particularly, there are a lot of companies. In fact, the whole SaaS movement, software service movement in India, is picked up really well because you have founders building products from here for a global audience, by using AI products. Then obviously predictive analytics in sales and marketing. I think sales function has, I feel, is something which is really leveraging data well, AI well, because at the end of the day, if you're able to understand customer behavior better and help you to get better lead gen, and you can do a very personalized outreach, right? And that kind of really makes the customer feel comfortable, right? I remember some of you might have got this notification, right, from Zomato. Like it's very personalized message, right? Like, are you feeling hungry, or the dosa is waiting for you? And it's very, very, sometimes it gets very cheesy as well, but it's very they are able to predict, they are able to kind of analyze your customer behavior. Of course, Zomato is an example, is a B2C example, but even in B2B space, they're able to do that as well, right? So identifying, forecast demanding, people are using it, upselling, what could be the potential need of people, what are the kind of products which we might end up selling. They might need it after, let's say, a few years. So let's start building it now itself, so that when they are ready, we are ready as well, right? And those are kind of conversations that often happens when we engage with a lot of our companies as well, right? Yeah, obviously, when it comes to solutions, because of the fact that we can actually now customize things, so we can actually do like cater to very customized business needs, right? So depending on the industry, depending on products, customization, white labeling, we can actually offer that as well. Also, like improve decision support systems. I think because we have lots of data points, like resource allocation, strategic planning, future forecasting. What are the trends? What could be the case? And obviously, in a strategy function, and we do this a lot when we do a lot of these sessions with like business leaders from organizations, where they're trying to really imagine what the business could look like in, let's say, 1 year down the line, 3 year down the line, 5 year down the line, right? And what are some key decisions that needs to be taken so that they can go to that path. In the case of B2C products, specifically, personalization, I think, has become a big example. As I was saying, the Zepto example or the Zomato example, they kind of give you very personalized things, right? Very personalized messaging. SMS is personalized. If you open your product, every product for a person is different, right? Because it kind of leverages your usage history, and on the basis of that is able to customize, right? Saying that because you purchased this pizza last time, maybe you want to try this thing this time, right? So there's a very lot of personalization that happens, and customer experience can be built on top of that as well. Obviously, chatbots. I think we have seen the evolution of chatbots over the years. There's this very interesting company called CoRover, which is into conversational AI and chatbots. One of our investment companies and one of my portfolio companies. And of course, customer support. I've often felt that there is still a lot of work to be done in customer support, because earlier it used to be very simple, right? Call a person, he would stay with you on the call and literally try to be with you. Now you're like, to get to the person is very difficult. So the pods itself have a lot of ground to cover when it comes to being critical in the customer satisfaction. Obviously, dynamic pricing, demand forecasting. I was reading an article recently where I think it was IRCTC or somebody else, which basically said that now we're going to start using dynamic pricing. I know airline industry does it all the time, but I think if you're able to predict what the demand would be in the, let's say, due to a festival, due to a certain thing, and this is, of course, all the models are being able to kind of build on top of that, right? Optimization on the marketing part as well. I think very clear, very obvious by now, because we have more data, we are able to kind of do this, right? So businesses are using AI to kind of refine marketing strategies, analyzing data based on customer preferences, engagement, past purchasing behaviors. I think all these tools, right? I think as we move into a world where more of these tools become more popular and common, we will see more such examples as well. So when it comes to data analytics, right? So obviously we saw, okay, you understand customer needs, there is behavior of customers, and then there is, we use the fact that there's a lot of data being generated. Obviously, you want to kind of capture these data, right? And eventually, in a way, you want to kind of use it to have a better informed decision making, right? Whether it comes to a product, when it comes to a product which can be given to a customer, a feature that can be highlighted for a customer, or eventually, have somebody help them with a better decision making, right? So we are in an era of decision making where decisions are more data driven, reducing the reliance on intuition. And I think this is kind of very interesting, because at the end of the day, the reliance on intuition is going to become very, it's something which more and more people are working towards, right? So obviously, predictive analysis of future trends, it helps us to understand future, like using historical data. And I won't go into details of these, just some kind of trends to say that, okay, this is how data can be used into product building, because these are, I want to leave some time in the end for some questions as well. And when you think from a perspective of what is it that happens with all this data, right? I think that's the fundamental question that we're trying to answer. Hey, because we have so much of our data, where all can we use it, right? So for example, understanding future trends, understanding the past performance of a certain thing, right? Like I remember when a certain product gets launched, like we launched this DIY onboarding feature, and we are like, but it didn't actually do the way it was intended to do in the market, right? What happened, right? So kind of you go back, you understand, insights from the past data, and then also for looking at, like how do you use both of that, the trends and the thing to optimize decision at a very strategic level for your next thing as well, right? So for optimizing decision making, we can do that, and also real time, right? I think product building has become faster nowadays, right? Specifically, if you look at with all these AI tools that are available around us, product building has also become faster. So the cost to actually go to market is also becoming shorter, right? The time to go to market is becoming shorter, right? And as a result of which, real-time analytics, real-time feedback, building products while on the live, and then basically making live. So the whole time to go to market is kind of reduced a lot, right? So immediately taking decisions, moving forward, once you have that real-time processing of data. So I think, it's, product building with AI at the core is happening around us already, right? It's not something which now we can be, kind of ignorant to, right? It's something which is already happening. If your company is not doing it, I think it's high time we do it. If it's doing it, I'm pretty sure it's already going to be doing a lot more, because that's the nature of things, right? For example, I'm sure all of you are on Netflix, or not on Netflix, maybe on Amazon Prime or Hotstar or whichever, Geo Hotstar now. But I think, like things like recommendation engines, right, which have been so like early days. I remember back in my college about like 17, 18 years ago, I started doing some research on recommendation engines. And of course, very preliminary days, right? Today, of course, the algorithms have become so smart in terms of, how they are able to predict. They really understand your, if you pause something certain at a manner, the recommendation that comes in, because we are spending more time on Netflix or on any of these OTT platforms, right? So you chose the example of entertainment, because entertainment is something which we are all leveraging a lot more. Airbnb, right? As I was saying earlier as well, that when it comes to, for example, guest experiences, right? How can you reimagine guest experiences now? So imagine this host who kind of anticipates what a guest really wants, right? And because they have some data, right? And maybe the Airbnb as a platform is able to share, of course, with the confidentiality out there, they're able to share what your customer really wants, what this host really wants, right? What this traveler really wants, and the host being able to cater to that, right? Also, for example, the whole customer feedback, I think NLP is becoming a lot more popular with the whole driving of AI as well. Or in general, if you look at in our context, right? I think almost every product that you see now is betting heavily on AI, right? Like Zomato, Swiggy, Myntra, Zepto, you name it, right? Blinkit. They're all kind of leveraging certain ways in AI. Obviously, some use it for understanding demand, understanding thing, looking at their warehouse management, and so on and so forth. But it is something which is now very deeply into our world, and I think it's going to really, continuously keep growing as we go along, right? But coming back to where we started with, right? Say that we have understanding of AI, we know that it's here to stay. We know that there's data. We know that there's data analytics which is going to happen. People are going to use it in different ways to predict, to understand performance, etc., etc. And with design thinking, right, where does it really add value? And I will leave you with this some open-ended thoughts, right? And these are some thoughts I keep thinking regularly, because as a researcher, as somebody who travels around the world, I keep having these thoughts about what happens, right? So now that we have artificial intelligence and design thinking, I think it has a potential to revolutionize the way we solve problems and innovate and build products, right? And it's a fundamental belief that I have. This whole thing about with design thinking, we bring human-centered approach towards understanding human needs and understanding challenges. And with AI, we can, understand the data that is being collected, machine learning is there, and automation, we bring that to the table, right? And when you bring them together, I think a lot more things can happen, right? And it's almost like saying that now design thinking is at the heart of AI, right? I feel, right? It's almost like, like you had design thinking, and this whole AI world is kind of encapsulated this whole world of design thinking. So it's almost like, whichever direction you go, there'll always be a certain level of AI at play, right? And so the question then becomes, right, which is saying that how can we empathize better with AI, right? Like if we have to do empathize as an exercise as an organization, but can we empathize better with AI now, right? So can we use data insights to understand needs better? Because earlier we were doing mostly interviews and thing, but let's say we start using better understanding of empathizing of users or our end stakeholders with AI, right? So, for example, can we use social media feeds to understand people's behaviors, their active times? They ensure that people are already doing it, or customer reviews kind of do that, right? So sentiment analysis is one of the domains which is kind of becoming very popular nowadays as well. Or for example, how can we define better, right? Like empathize, define, if you come to the second phase. So when you decide what you want to go ahead with, right? Like this is the direction that you want to move ahead with. Can that be more driven not by a product manager's or a CEO's decision saying, hey, we should build this? Can it actually be backed by proper data, right? Can the problem framing be backed with actual data? And your AI tools can really help you to do that, right? Because at the end of the day, you were able to analyze it, and then the systems can actually give you some direction, right? For example, how can you ideate better, right? I think all of us are probably using ChatGPT. All of us are probably using the tools out there to just create content, right? So imagine if you have to say, okay, let's create an interface for this particular product which does this. You put it into an LLM, you put it into a product. Sorry, you put it in the product, and this whole AI-based, AI augmented, right? Brainstorming, right? Just to give options. And many times people say that, hey, brainstorming needs lots of people, but now that the lots of other people is the product that is out there, the tool that is out there, right? And that becomes your, that becomes the go-to persons per se to kind of start to engage in brainstorm. So exploring alternative solutions, improving or understanding patterns in existing solutions, and so on and so forth. That can also be kind of driven accordingly, right? So or for example, crowdsourcing ideas using AI, right? Like I think a lot of people use that. It's no longer the case where we can, first of all, we don't take decision based on just one idea or based on one solution. We always try to get it, we have options and we try to choose. So with AI, obviously we can ideate better, because obviously what we can think, let's say 10 ideas. And if I put a prompt saying, give me like 100 ideas, I'm sure you can give me 100 ideas, right? So there's no limit to it. It's about how we use it in our thing, right? Can we prototype better? I'm sure you all are familiar with the fact that almost all tools, right? For example, Figma or any of these tools that exist, they all are using AI a lot more, right? Generative AI. Adobe just launched Firefly a few years ago, which basically leverages AI. Photoshop has now a lot more AI capabilities than it used to be now, used to ever be. So can we prototype better with AI, right? So the prototypes can become more realistic, right? It doesn't have to be only boxes and arrows. And the moment it's more realistic, people can give you better feedback as well, right? So rapid prototyping as a culture, can become, you can actually recreate new stuff based on feedback in a much faster manner, so that we are able to get more feedback from people, right? So and that could basically lead to data-driven testing, right? Which is basically saying that, can we test better, right, with people? Can we actually put in a parameter saying, okay, how would a, let's say, certain demographic people use this in what we're doing, right? And can a certain demographic people use it? Give me some feedback, or actually find a system which actually plays the role of those diverse set of users, put in the different use cases, reimagine all the different scenarios, give me the use cases, give me the edge cases, and then eventually I'm able to kind of analyze all those data and iterate on the product, right? So once we start to look at the same empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test, right? The 5 stages of design thinking. But the moment you add in that layer of AI, I think the possibilities also open up a lot, right? And I personally have been very exploring this a lot, because I feel that and it's not just that a designer has to do it, right? Product manager could do it, an L&D person can do it, anybody from operations could do it, anybody from, let's say, some other function can also do it, because the tools are out there. And many of these tools actually don't even have a very high learning curve, right? It's actually very easy to kind of learn out as well. So with all of those, I think that's where we kind of come to a pause, pretty much on time there. But I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of how the fact that design thinking has been around for so much time, but with the AI wave, right, with the whole set of new products that we are building, there is a lot more happening, and I think it will happen a lot more. At the core of it being the whole notion of customer centricity, at the core of it being the fact that we are thinking about identifying needs really well. If you're able to do that, I think we'll be much better with our product building process. So yeah, so that's me on my thing. Just wanted to quickly share my coordinates in case anybody's wanting to connect me on LinkedIn. My phone number, my emails is there as well. Pretty much accessible. And yeah, we can take a few questions. I think there were a couple of questions on the chat window as well. Let me just quickly open those up. Yeah. Couple of questions which are there on the chat. I'll just go through them. Anita has this question. What is the fundamental difference between design thinking and systems thinking? Would you say there are same in terms of frameworks and tools, or are they different based on the outcome that they produce? Yeah. So great question, Anita. So I do sessions on design thinking and systems thinking, which are different in my opinion. System thinking is more from a very system perspective, right? And when you say system perspective, it actually allows you to see things from a much, much larger perspective. You start to analyze things like interdependencies a lot more. You start to analyze things like where the system might fall apart a lot more. You start seeing things at a very macro perspective. With design thinking, it becomes more on focusing on the end user. So the like every like lean thinking, systems thinking, agile way of working, design thinking, each thinking framework has its own so-called USP, right? But design thinking, the USP is more about being very human-centric in nature. With systems thinking, it becomes more about the system as a large. Now, when I say system, stakeholders could be, let's say, government, right? Stakeholders could be my competitors. Stakeholders could be any other person who is not really part of my system directly as well, but they're still part of the system and not part of my solution, but still part of my larger system, right? So there are certain things that we kind of focus upon in systems thinking thing. And some frameworks are different. Obviously, empathy is at the core of both systems thinking and design thinking. So that's a fundamental commonality there. But when it comes to just the approach of understanding it, I think it kind of differs as well. When it comes to, let's say, for example, when I used to do system thinking sessions with my team at Paytm, we used to do a lot with product managers. And it used to be primarily with this notion of how do we look at the product roadmap, let's say, a few months down the line, a few years down the line, and how do you think the product might evolve, right? In the larger system where, let's say, more people are using a product, what is the new thing that will come up, a new need that will come up in the future, which will still be a part of the system, and how do we start to design for them, right? So those are the kind of things that we kind of look at. All right. Second question, Anita. Oh, Anita again. Should there be an age limit for using AI technologies, particularly due to concerns regarding privacy, mental health, and development? Oh, yes. I mean, like, see, it's I really I really think that there should be, but it's very difficult to implement it here because I mean, like, I have two kids at home, and I know how challenging it is. I'm telling you from first-hand experience because I mean, one few moments the phone is lying around, my kids are like, picking it up, right? So yes, it is a challenge, but I think, encouraging social skills in children is a different webinar altogether. We should probably talk about that because I do a lot of work in early childhood education and thing as well. But yeah, I think to your question that should there be an age limit, I'm sure there are guidelines by a lot of governments in the Western. Some countries, they have very strict guidelines. Like in, for example, in Europe, in a few countries, they have very strict guidelines on what should be the usage of children, when they can access it, how much time they should access it. It's all kind of mapped out. In India, we're still not there. Probably we might do, but then might be already too much of a damage done. So we'll see how things play out. I think the personal conscious is about how consciously oneself is towards like the kids or people using the different and it's not just kids actually. I'll tell you one very interesting fact, right? A lot of elderly generation are actually hooked onto YouTube and Reels a lot more than young generation. You'd be very surprised by this, right? But it's a fact. And you go to any small town where you'll find people sitting in like thing sitting together in groups. Which generally it's like in small towns you have more the concept of people coming together is a lot more common, but they're all watching reels together, right? Or like everybody's on their phone watching reels, and it's kind of phenomenal. It's across the country which is happening. But yeah, all these tools are just out there because every time you watch that is data being captured, right? And data is again then being used. Okay, this is what you like, so I'm going to give you more, and so on. All right. Kritika question, how can organizations in agile or lean thinking transition into design thinking, right? So I think, it's not about transitioning into design thinking. I would rather say it's about embracing design thinking because, design thinking is kind of, as I said, in the slide where I talked about, agile way of doing things, design thinking and lean. So lean basically, so design thinking gives you more question on the why part, right? Like, why are we doing this? Why does my customer need it? Why does my organization need this? Why does my stakeholder need it? So design thinking focuses a lot more on the why, and it enables us to go deeper into understanding that why part of it. Once you're very clear about, okay, this is why we want to do this, then you kind of build an MVP, right? Which is more of the lean way of doing things. So, okay, let's try it out. Let's build an MVP, go to market, get some feedback. And if we feel that it's right, then we kind of build it in a larger scalable manner, which is where the agile thinking comes in, right? So I think best organizations leverage all of them. It's not about either or, but it's always about taking all of them together in any product building process. All right. All right. There are a couple of questions on the chat window. So, are there more? We hope there are more workshops with real life near examples of how to use design thinking in larger project help people. Absolutely, I think the edForce team and we keep talking. I'm sure there will be a lot more sessions on design thinking that we plan to do in the coming days, where we can have you. And I think it will be good because when we do the workshop, though, actually, like we did this in about 1.5 hours. The workshops are for like 2 days, right? So in 2 days, we imagine we actually go into each phase. We go with like actual frameworks, actual tools, we make sure you kind of understand the tools, understand the framework, and you develop the skill sets so that you're able to kind of pick it up, right? So and then we take an actual product or actual problem to solve. So the workshops are more hands-on, it's more deeper, work together, so that way you're able to understand the concepts a lot. All right, cool. Any other questions? Anybody else? We have about 5 minutes left, so in case there are any questions.
I think more than the question, what people are waiting for is the reward of being a part of
They're ready for you,
it.
yes. All right, so yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Thiru. Yeah, thank you everyone for your participation. And yeah, I look forward to, staying in touch. As I said, I'm always connected on LinkedIn. I'm always available for anything that you want me to help out with. Just feel free to reach out. Yeah, Vivek has one question. Wait, one last question. As designers, how can we build user trust when integrating AI into our products, ensuring that interactions feel transparent, reliable, and human-centered? That's a big multi-million-dollar question, Vivek. But yeah, I think this is like this whole. I often call this whole identity crisis question, right? Because it also translates to broadly saying, will AI replace us as designers, right? Because that is something which often we end up talking about. But I think like as I said, if you're able to show value, right, saying that this is where we have value as designers, of course, and one, of course, we are adding trust into your team itself. But when you look with the users, right, see, the choice of what you do with the data that you've collected is always with you, right? So let's say you know that this guy is ordering pizzas, let's say every single day for 30 days a month. Let's say you're a designer at Zomato. I don't know where you work with, but let's say you're a designer at Zomato, and you've noticed that this particular user has ordered pizzas like 3 times a day, 30 days a month, right? Now, what do you do with that data? Do you actually upsell a doctor consultation for diabetes? Or do you say that, okay, maybe you should think, or like you should buy about how about trying something healthy? Can there be a product feature? I'm just thinking aloud, right? So, and that will probably also make it, right? Say that, okay, I know that you're doing this, I know that you're doing this, but here's something that you can probably explore as well. And so when you start having that kind of relations with your customer, right? Because customers know now that you are capturing data. So there's no like denying that. But can you really do something about it? So that can translate into, let's say, product features, the way your messaging works, the way your like the collecting customer feedback works. And those can be something which kind of enhances customers trust a lot more as well. Yeah, Vivek, I hope that answered. If not, we can always get another call some point in time, and engage more as well.
Thank you everyone for joining today's edTalk on design thinking and digital transformation. A special thanks to Kshitiz Anand for sharing such valuable insights on leveraging AI and data analytics to drive innovation. Your expertise has truly enriched our session.